Ah, the classroom, daily occupied by students with eager minds ready to be filled with the vastness of knowledge that you as a teacher hold. And while you as a teacher would always like things to go well in your class, sometimes that won't be the case. Let's join Mr. Bumblemeyer halfway through his 2-hour 4th period class, and let's see how he is doing. Uh-oh. The class doesn't look like it seems to be going very well. Little Billy has an ice pack on his head. Some of the students are writing, but they appear nervous or anxious. And Betty seems to be crying. And Johnny? Well, Johnny seems to be more interested in his hair. Let's find Mr. Bumblemeyer and see if we can find out what's wrong. What's the matter, Mr. Bumblemeyer? Are you having a rough day? Is the class not going the way you expected? Is the problem the kids? Are they being dumb and academically challenged? Would you call them stubborn and stupid? But is the problem really them? Could it be something else? Could it be you? That's right, Mr. Bumblemeyer. It could be you. And through the process called reflective thinking or reflection, we can determine what went wrong. Before we begin, let's ask ourselves, what is reflection? Reflection, simply put, is the process of thinking, questioning, problem solving, and decision making. For a teacher, it means to put on one's thinking cap, to consider educational issues, themes, events, circumstances, and topics. And as a teacher, you must think deliberately and carefully about issues and practices. Reflection will inspire you to ask not only what happened, but why. So, Mr. Bumblemeyer, let's put on your thinking cap. Do you have a thinking cap? No? What do you have? Ah, boxer shorts. As long as they're clean, that will be fine. That's right. Now, let's begin to reflect for a moment on what happened earlier in your class. When teachers are unable to reach their goals, they must find out what went wrong and then see what they can do in the future to make their objectives more attainable. Now let's begin by asking ourselves just a few questions. Were your lessons meaningful and relevant to your students' lives? Did they seem interested in what you had to say? Were they easily distracted? And what about the way you wrote your notes on the board? Were your students able to keep up? And what about the way you handled Sleeping Billy? And how did that affect your students? Well, Mr. Bumblemeyer, it sure looks like you could stand to change a few things. Do you see why it's important to reflectively think? Let's take a moment and see exactly what the process of reflection is and how it can benefit you as a teacher. Reflection is cyclical in nature. It involves developing and refining the skills to think, question, reflect, and to act, all of which are connected to each other. The cycle of reflection begins when teachers think about issues and concerns associated with teaching and learning. There are, however, different levels of thinking. At the surface level, little deliberation or contemplation is involved. Take the thirsty Mr. Jones. It doesn't take much thought to realize he could go for a cold soda, especially when he has a handful of change. But what if we remove some of that change? Different sodas cost different amounts, Mr. Jones. Thinking has now become more purposeful for Mr. Jones, who must now choose. And still more thought is required as Mr. Jones must choose between buying a soda and repaying the money he borrowed to coach Betty of the girls' basketball team. You see, Mr. Bumblemeyer, what is involved here is the depth of thinking that is required. If you are alert, you begin to monitor your thinking and the procedures involved in your thinking. This is called metacognition. It's when you think about how you are thinking and the strategies you use to process information. Remember when you put on your thinking cap and asked all those questions? You begin the cycle of reflection by thinking about and recalling experiences and events that happened throughout your class. When it comes to reflective thinking, teachers become investigators who probe, inspect, study, and examine in order to convert a predicament that is confusing, conflicting, and disturbing into a situation that is clear and comprehensible. It is necessary in order to find a list of possible solutions. So you see, Mr. Bumblemeyer, by thinking our way through today's lesson and experience, we can help find solutions to the problems that you experienced earlier. The next step in the cycle after thinking is to begin to ask yourself questions, much like we did with Mr. Bumblemeyer. This is to help teachers distinguish between pertinent and irrelevant information. Questions may start out as very broad, like, what if? I wonder why? Or golly gee, could it be that? But as teachers become more precise in their thinking, the questions become more detailed and direct, like, what should I have done? What can I do next time? Why did I react that way? And what have I learned from this? As you refine your reflective thinking skills, you'll be able to answer the questions, solve the problems, or resolve the conflicts. This will help in maintaining a learning environment in which each student is able to experience a sense of personal fulfillment. And success is crucial. And when asking questions, ask questions of other professionals, or ask questions of yourself, listening and debating with your inner voice. What's that, Mr. Bumblemeyer? You hear dead people? No, not those voices. Perhaps your supervisor should reflectively think about your position. Just kidding, Mr. Bumblemeyer. Ha 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 ha. The next step is reflection. And in order to reflect, teachers must clarify what they are thinking about. They must shed some light on what has occurred, just like Mr. Bumblemeyer has. There are two types of reflection: reflection on action and reflection in action. Reflection on action occurs when teachers are able to think and question events, actions, or conversations after they have already occurred. Reflection in action occurs when teachers are thinking about what they're doing while they're doing it. This type of reflection has a sense of urgency about it. If no students are understanding your lesson, you may have to change directions in midstream in order to salvage the lesson and help the students. As a teacher, you must often question, analyze, and act instantaneously or think on one's feet. Reflection includes the past, present, and the future. If teachers do not reflect upon the future and anticipate what might happen, they become motionless and their future actions will remain somewhat ineffectual. When reflecting, teachers must be aware of and allow for different viewpoints. Their personal viewpoint is not the only one that should be considered. As you can see, Mr. Bumblemeyer is beginning to reflect on the total picture, accessing all available viewpoints and carefully inspecting what others may be thinking. This will allow him to get a view of the situation or lesson from another perspective in order to begin to critique his teaching endeavors. It's through reflection that teachers can look critically at teaching and student learning, search for a deeper understanding and meaning of classroom events, consider their strengths and weaknesses, identify ways to improve, and formulate a plan for subsequent action. As we see, Mr. Bumblemeyer is beginning to put into practice, or acting as it relates to the final phase of the circle, the decisions that were made based on his thinking, questions, and his reflection. Notice the big difference in response as Mr. Bumblemeyer has effectively reflected and acted accordingly. It looks as if he's asking a very tough question. The student seems stumped. Except for Johnny. Wait a minute. Johnny's supposed to be tough and dumb. Does Johnny have the right answer? Way to go, Johnny! That answer was swell. So remember, teachers must take the time to enhance their thinking to properly reflect about the course, their strengths and weaknesses, and the viewpoints of others in order for you as the teacher to succeed at teaching and the student at learning.